Are we on? Are we on? Welcome, welcome, welcome to Basketball Heads Live. I am your host, Glenn Pooh Harding. And oh boy, we have a very special guest. This basketball head is a former legendary basketball agent for the likes of New York City legends Dwayne, Pearl, Washington, and Anthony Mason. This basketball head was introduced to the business by legendary college buddy, Syracuse alum, and Detroit Pistons legend Dave Bing. This basketball head will go on to represent many NBA players like Chuck Robinson. And what about NFL players like Ed Too Tall Jones? Not just a football player, but a Hall of Fame football player. Tonight, we will do a deep dive into his world of the sports agent, which includes his amazing story. So, without further ado, help me welcome to the show legendary sports agent Don Cronson.
Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Yes. You have just stepped out into the world of chaos. Where everybody goes hard. Come on. Go hard. Go hard. Go hard. Go hard. Go hard. Go hard. Or go home. Never back down. You gotta hold your own. Go hard. Go hard. Go hard. Go hard. Go hard. Go hard. East Coast. Go hard. West Coast. Go hard. Midwest. Go hard. Dirty. Hurry up, everybody. Get online. Buy your tickets cause the game about to start.
Hey, what's happening? What's happening, Don?
Hello there, Glenn. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Did you hear me nice and clear on that intro?
It's a wonderful intro. You laid it on thick and very nice. Let me say this. I am a former agent, but I'm not so sure I'm legendary, other than some people have said I'm a rumor in my own time and a legend in my own room. But other than that, I appreciate your nice words.
Listen, you got to represent Dwayne Pearl Washington, Anthony Mason, and Hall of Famer Too Tall Jones.
Actually,
who played
he's not in the Hall of Fame, by the way.
He's not in the Hall of Fame?
He's not in the Hall of Fame. He should be.
That is a crying shame. I've been a Dallas Cowboy fan since 1977.
Well, Ed played for the boys he had a 16-year career in sports, 15 with the Cowboys and 1 year in boxing, of all things. And I was there for all of it.
Man, he should be in the Hall of Fame.
I agree. He changed the game. He was one of these guys back in the day because of his ability, athletic, and his size, blocking passes, blocking the quarterback's view. That really hadn't happened on any regular basis from any one player until he came along, and he on that basis changed the game. Very few players, as great as they've been, even in the Hall of Fame, have changed the game. I'm very familiar with Ed, and also back in the day, my fraternity brother from Syracuse, John Mackey, who later went on to become the first tight end inducted into the Hall of Fame and voted one of the top 5 tight ends in the history of the game. There's a new volume that's just come out, the NFL 100, and it names the top 100 players in the history of the NFL, celebrating their 100th anniversary. And of course, John is one of those players. He changed the game, and there he is. But
wow, that's amazing. I want to say salute to my guy Peter Martin in the building, and Ayatollah Beats definitely in the building. Peter Martin very close friend to the Washington family, very close friends with Pearl. So we definitely want to give him a shout out. And I want to welcome back my guy, Jamel Powell. Y'all know he started the show with me, making these wonderful art pieces, and we stepped it up. So at the end of the show, we get to show the world what he's doing for Don Cronson and the likes of Pearl and Anthony Mason. So
you might mention also Mark Jackson was my client for many years.
Oh, we going to get into all of that.
A lot of Knicks. Michael Ray Richardson, Chuck Robinson. I was in the Garden a lot.
Wow. We definitely going to get into all that. But I want to know, who introduced you to the game? Like, who introduced you to the game of basketball?
Well, really, it was my dad. My dad was a sportsman. In real life, he was an attorney. Jersey, West New York, New Jersey, which was where I was born, although soon thereafter we moved to Teaneck, and I considered Teaneck, New Jersey, my hometown. But my dad was a big sports fan. Yankees. He took me to Yankee Stadium in 1950 when I was just a young kid. And I really have been a Yankee fan since that time. You're talking 75 years there, 74, 75 years. In fact, I was fortunate enough to literally drive in the last World Series celebration parade. As you might remember, the Yankees won their last World Series in 2009. And one of the people in the team marketing section knew that I, at the time, owned a 1966 Lincoln Continental convertible, a beautiful car.
Hold on. We blow. These are positive texts in the show. Please mention that car again. Like, this is
1966 Lincoln Continental convertible, suicide doors, 20 feet long. And they knew I had it, and they called and said, "Would I like to drive in a parade?" And I said, "Are you kidding? I'm a lifelong Yankee fan." And I got to drive Michael Kay, the Yankees TV announcer, up the Canyon of Heroes. And I still have a bag full of the confetti, as it were, the paper and that they threw in celebration. It was one of the great sports thrills of my life, to say the least.
And what was the first game that you saw?
The first game I ever
saw. First basketball. We're talking about basketball now.
I remember literally going to the 1954 NBA All-Star game in Madison Square Garden. That was not the first game I saw. I was into basketball before that, watching the Knicks play on, I think it was Channel 11, and Bud Palmer was one of the announcers, and Bob Wolf, I think, was one of the announcers. I was watching, but the Yankees were my first. But as far as basketball, I was watching pro basketball early on. And then as my, I'd say, 11th birthday was approaching, I was born in 42, and obviously in 54 I was gonna be 12. All right.
Right.
My dad said, "What do I want for my birthday?" This was a few weeks before. I said, "Dad, there's two things. General Motors, the auto company, is having its annual dream car show at the Roosevelt Hotel, and on, I believe it was January 28th. You could check me. It was in late January. The NBA, it's playing its All-Star game in Madison Square Garden. I think that was perhaps the third All-Star game in history."
Wow.
And my dad being my dad, what a great man he was. He took me in the afternoon to the Roosevelt Hotel, and I saw all the GM dream cars. And then we went to the Garden that night, and we saw the East-West All-Star game. And supposedly this was the game that put the NBA on the map. just as in 1958, the giant Baltimore Colt championship game was supposedly the game that put the NFL on the map. I vividly remember the game because as time is running out, the East is up by 2.
Uh-huh.
And the West has possession, brings the ball up, and passes it into superstar center George Mikan, Minneapolis Lakers. Yep. He was probably one of the earliest great.
He was the premier. He was the premier player back then.
And he was being guarded by the Knicks young player Ray Felix. And Mikan took a shot, missed it at the buzzer, but was fouled. And the refs cleared everybody off. Time had run out. Mikan gets 2 shots. West is down by 2. I still remember he's standing more or less at the top of the key. He's got a smile on his face. He literally crosses himself religiously.
Right.
Steps up to the line and underhands 2 shots that bounce, and go in. So now the game's tied, overtime. Bob Cousy, East superstar, takes over the game. I think he scored 8 points in the overtime. Whatever. The East wins going away. Still one of my great sports memories, basketball especially.
And we want to give a big shout out to Bob Cousy, New York City legend. That's right. Andrew Jackson High School.
You
doing
got
it
it
big.
You
That's right. So I want you to walk me through the story that you told me the other day, because I thought it was so amazing. I was trying to remember bits and pieces, but it was just so much history. And I guess we could kick off at Syracuse University, right? When you met, when Dave Ben kind of introduced you to the business.
Syracuse is my alma mater. I got there in 1960. My dad had gone there before me. And later on, my sister went there and one of my nephews went there. But in any case, I got into a fraternity, Sigma Alpha Mu, or Sammy as they called it.
Sammy.
Now, 2 years before I got there, 1958, a freshman came to Syracuse, African-American freshman, Ernie Davis, football player.
Yes.
He became a Sammy, Sigma Alpha Mu. Great story as to how he got into the fraternity, but let me continue. In 1959, John Mackey came to Syracuse, and he became a Sammy. I got there in 60, and when I got there, already in the fraternity the year before was Marv Albert, later on the famous Hall of Fame broadcaster. Also in the fraternity at the time was a guy named Donnie Shupak. Now, nobody knows who he is, but he was involved in 2 of the most significant things in the second half of the 20th century sports-wise. Number one, Donnie gave Bob Costas his career. I mean, literally. What happened was Donnie was the personal attorney for Ozzie and Dan Silner. The Silner brothers owned the Charlotte franchise in the ABA. In other words, the ABA formed up in the late 60s and merged with the NBA in 1976.
Yeah.
In 1970, the Silner brothers moved their Charlotte franchise to St. Louis and renamed it the Spirits of St. Louis. Donnie was out there overseeing, setting everything up for the new St. Louis franchise when he was told by some of his people that the team needed an announcer for its games. And Donnie said, get about 50 tapes together, analyze them, and bring me the top 5 or 6, which they did. And Donnie said, did any of these young men go to Syracuse? And they said, yeah, this young guy, Bob Costas. Donnie said, give him the job. Now, I know that's absolutely the truth. A, I read the story. B, I know it from Donnie himself. And C, Bob Costas told me the story. Me standing right next to him at a function we both attended some years ago.
I heard about this story.
And so Bob Costas owes Donnie his career, literally. The other thing Donnie did was when the leagues merged in 76, 4 of the teams came into the NBA: Denver, San Antonio, Indiana, and the then New York Nets. The other teams had to sign off on the merger, and what was done was their rights were by and large sold, franchise rights. At the time, the going rate was $2 to $3 million. I said million, not billion. We'd say about today. In any case, Donnie says to his people, to the Silners, let's think outside the box. And he comes up with the concept of let's get as payment for our signing off on the merger, media rights as if we were in the league. In other words, every team was getting its share, albeit very small share, of what was then the NBA media rights, TV, radio, etc. And because these rights were at the time worth a pittance, hardly anything, the league agreed, and Donnie drafted what they call now the in perpetuity contract, which said that whatever they were going to get, they keep forever. Now, from that time until 2017, in other words, about 6 years ago, the Silner brothers had collected $250 million on the rights because, as we all know, the TV rights became very, very valuable as time went on. The league, over the years, had tried to get out of the deal. I remember when Donnie Walsh became the general manager and president of the Knicks. I knew Donnie over the years, and I went up to his office and we sat down, and I decided, hey, Donnie, I said, what do you know the name Don Shupak, which I knew he did. He said, oh my God. We try to get out of that contract. We try to buy him out. We try to end run it. We couldn't get out of the contract. Well, now it's 2017 and the league decides, let's get this done. And they made a deal with the Silners and they sold the rights for another $500 million. That's a $750 million deal that Donnie put together. Pretty impressive, to say the least.
So you saying that by giving them this $500 million, the contract is null and void after that? They don't get paid for the NBA anymore.
Think Donnie told me they kept a small percentage. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But by and large, the big bucks, so to speak, were ended. The league now kept that money and they walked away. The Silners walked away to the bank. And now, as I said, I was at Syracuse in 1962. Dave Bing came to school, and I'll tell you the background in a moment. Also, another guy came to school, Jimmy Boeheim. He was a walk-on in 1962. Nobody cared that much about him as a player, but he developed into a terrific college player. And as I said to people, he's one of the smartest players I ever saw. He learned how to play ball with Dave, and they were a terrific backcourt. And David became a fraternity brother also, and is still a very good friend to this day, as is Jimmy Boeheim. I saw Jimmy a few weeks ago when he was down here in New York City doing interviews. And David is going to be inducted into the Syracuse Ring of Honor. That's we're at the Dome where they play. They have all the names of the great Syracuse players and people in the sports program, starting, of course, with Jim Brown, then Ernie Davis, Floyd Little, Ben Schwartzwalter. He was the coach of the undefeated 1959 national championship football team, Roy Simmons, who coached the lacrosse team for decades and had any number of national championships and Final Fours. Recently inducted were my client, Pearl Washington, and Jimmy Boeheim. I was up there for that. And Dave Bing is going to be inducted into the ring this coming January 27th, and I'll undoubtedly be there for that.
So how did he
group at Syracuse?
Right. So how did he kind of open your mind up to the world of sports, the sports agency world? By telling you that deal that happened with the St. Louis Spirits?
David is responsible for my career as follows. After Syracuse, I went to law school, and after law school, I went to graduate school, and I was in graduate school, UCLA, out in LA from September of 67 till December of 68. And in November of 68, I saw where the Detroit Pistons, Dave's team, were playing the then San Diego Rockets. That was before the Rockets moved to Houston.
Wow.
I said, hey, I'm going to go see Dave, my fraternity brother, my friend, see him play, which I did. San Diego is about an hour and a half from LA, easy drive. And a good buddy of mine from Syracuse, who was also very friendly with Dave, flew in from Denver, and we both drove down. And on the way, he said to me, Donnie, you got to meet the head scout for the Rockets. His name is Max Shapiro. And when we went down to see the game, we went over to the hotel, said hello to Dave, and then went over to the offices, and I was introduced to Max. And after the game was over, went back to UCLA and graduated the following month, December 68, and came back east. Now, Max and I kept in touch, and Max was one of these guys who thought outside the box.
Right.
He says to himself, he told me subsequently, why should I be a $7,500 a year scout? I can become a sports agent. I know where all these players are. I know who they are. I scouted them. At the time, the late 60s and early 70s, the field of athletic representation, athletic agents, was just being created, was just birthing, because prior to that time, the salaries were not large enough, were not big enough to justify financial advisors. What you needed to do as an athlete was get an off-season job to help pay the rent, so to speak. And Max set up a sports camp, and he would invite many of the top, what they call rising seniors, to use the Howard Garfinkel term. These were young men who were in the summer before their senior year in school, in college. And he'd bring these guys out and he'd sign them if he could, even though you weren't supposed to sign guys until their eligibility was over. But he signed a number of guys. And then one day, and I was all the time trying to get into sports. I was calling people and doing what people do when they want to get a job. They call, they knock on doors, they write letters, but to no avail, in that then as now, even though the field now is much, much bigger, there were more people who wanted to get into the business than there were available jobs. But Max called me in 1971. He said, Donnie, I need an attorney in my business. And he hired me through the law firm that I was working for. In other words, I stayed with the firm, but started working with and for him and meeting and knowing all of his clients. And Max was one of these guys back in the day. He heavily scouted what we now call the historically black colleges and universities.
Yes.
Not all the scouts like to go to these schools, but Max did this big time. I'm talking about Tennessee State, Grambling, Jackson State, a lot of the names that we're now familiar with. And one of his main place, so to speak, was Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee. At the time, two of Tennessee State's players, Teddy Hound McClain, was in the NBA, as was Lloyd Neal. Lloyd, in fact, played on the 1977 Portland Trailblazers NBA championship team. In any case, Max had all these relationships, and he was especially close to Ed Martin, the head basketball coach at Tennessee State. Now it's 1972, and Max, thinking outside the box again, goes to Johnny Wooden, as in the coach John Wooden at UCLA, and says,
I
Coach,
love this story.
Now, Wooden had already won 7, 8 national, maybe 9 national championships. And Max says, Coach, how much you make a year? And Wooden says $25,000 a year. True story. And Max said,
Hold on, Coach. Hold on, Don. Hold on, Don. John Wooden, legendary UCLA coach. He's won 8 national championships so far, and he's getting paid.
I have to figure it might have been 9. He won 10 out of 12, and starting in 64, I have to
getting
paid
$25,000 a year.
That's God's truth. Max, Max's lips to my ears, and Max is, very, became very close to Wooden, because he said, Coach, let me start the John Wooden basketball camps. I will get you 500 kids in 3 weeks. We will charge each of them $100. We'll make $50,000, and I will give you $35,000. And John Wooden agreed. But Wooden said, Max, I don't want you to be an agent anymore. So Max says, okay. Max leaves the business, and I leave the law firm and pick up where Max, so to speak, had left off. I knew his clients and knew his people by that time. And I started my own sports representation business in 1972. Now it's 1973 in May.
Hold on for a sec. Pause for a sec, Don. Pause for a sec. We have Professor Mike Milligan, Lou High, great, legendary player, right? He said you represented him. He said Hound Dog was one of my mentors at TSU.
Yeah.
Right? He said Ed is the one that introduced me to Don.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have all this, and
wow.
It's now
salute, Mike.
1973. I get a call from Ed Martin, the head basketball coach. He says, Donnie, you got to come down here. There's this kid on the football team the scouts really like. His name is Ed Too Tall Jones. So Ed Jones became the first player that I went after, recruited, tried to make a client. First player I went after on my own. Now, I didn't get Ed as a client until 3 years later. But that year, 1973, I go down in May and I meet Ed. As I said, I'm recruiting him. Ed's senior year, which was the fall of 73, he played on an undefeated national championship black college team, which had 5 players drafted on the first 2 rounds, which is pretty much unheard of, especially for a small school.
Right.
Number 1 overall pick was Too Tall Jones to the Dallas Cowboys. Number 4 overall pick was Wayman Bryant, middle linebacker to the Chicago Bears, whose career was sadly cut short by a bad shoulder injury. Also, they had 3 guys drafted on the second round, and I got one of them as my first client, John Holland, a wide receiver drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. So that got me, started. And again, let me refer back to Dave Bing. Had I not gone to see Dave play a game, therefore I would not have met Mac Shapiro. Who knows? I might never have gotten into the business. And so, on top of everything else, thank you, Dave, because that was the connection. The following year, 1974, I got Truck Robinson out of Tennessee State University. He wasn't called Truck then. He got that nickname when he played for the Washington Bullets, but you know the name and I know the name. And so I'm really, that started me off in just a great way. but I tell people that I recruited the wrong people at Tennessee State because there was this little girl over in the dormitory and her name was Oprah Winfrey. And had I known what I know now, you can be sure I would have tried to recruit her.
Definitely.
Gosh, no, she became Oprah Winfrey. What can I say?
There was a lot of talent down at Tennessee State, and that's what I was saying.
Every year,
Mike Milligan, he also went there and starred there as well. So, man, so much going on. Now, another question I want to ask you is, how much can an agent earn off a client's contract if he gets them signed or if he's doing a deal?
Well,
like what is that situation like?
I've been out of the business. I did the business from 1971 to 2003, 32 years. I'm, long since out of the business, but the way it works now in both football and basketball is that the players' union controls the fee schedules for agents because, and this was back in my day, this was not going on, and you had people charging 10% was sort of the going rate. Right now, I think it's 3% in football, and I think it's 3% in basketball also. Back then, you had people charging 10, 15, 20. I know I represented a player because his agent had signed him to a contract. Let's say the contract was worth $100,000, and he got a $10,000 signing bonus. Well, the agent's fee would have been $10,000 over 3 years. In other words, even if he's charging 10%, it would have been the 10% of whatever the player made. Well, that's what it should have been. This agent took the 10% right off the top, meaning he took the guy's whole signing bonus, and it turns out the player got cut and never really even made the rest of the $100,000. I took it to arbitration for him, and I won the case. But there was all sorts of stuff, quote unquote, going on, fees, and you owe me this and you owe me that. The other thing, by the way, that I did besides negotiate was when a player chose me to do it, I became his financial advisor. In other words, I advised him on whether it was house closings or investments or this or that. And one of the best things I did, I knew that just like any young kids, 20 years old, African-American, white, athletes, non-athletes, you got money in your pocket, you tend to spend it. I mean, that's the way we are. It's the way youth is. And I sat down with Ed one day. Ed was a very smart man. He listened. He understood. He said yes when he wanted to. He said no when he wanted to. And he knew exactly what was going on. I said, Ed, let me run this by you. As long as you're playing football, you're going to make real money. Whatever, then, it's my job to get you the best contracts and all. But one way or the other, you're a star player. And even back then, you're going to make hundreds of thousands instead of millions. The real question you should ask yourself, and I'm asking you now, is what's going to be when you're 35, meaning when you're retired, whether it's 35 or 25, if you get hurt or whatever. I want you to think about the following. I want in every contract that I negotiate for you, I want you to let me negotiate a deferred payment clause where the sum of the money you're earning now is going to be put away and available after you retire. And Ed, as I said, the smart man it is, said, that's good. I negotiated 3 or 4 contracts for Ed. Back in the day, what you wanted to do was get a short contract rather than in today's situation where you want extended years. Why? Because back then, the only guaranteed money you could get in football was with your signing bonus.
That's right.
Everything else was, so to speak, on the come. They could cut you anytime. You were not very well protected. And over the years, as I said, I did 3 or 4 contracts. And when you totaled up the deferred payment clauses, the day Ed retired, he started getting $300,000 a year for the next 25 years. He got a check for 25 grand every month. And, he rode off into the sunset. I mean, he was making not as much, but, a very nice living wage when all of his other teammates were scratching for jobs after they retired to earn money. And he had this deferred payment situation, which not only did I get it done with the Cowboys, but I had them annuitize it. In other words, they took it at my request to an insurance company. In other words, yes, it was the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL, but how do I know what's going to be 20, 25 years from now with the Cowboys? I know that MetLife, Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, or something similar, they're still going to be around. So I annuitized the deferred payments. And as I said, every month I'd get a check for 25, less the federal income tax. In Texas, there's no state income tax. And his FICA had already been paid when he actually received his paychecks during the time he was playing. So that worked out great. And
that was awesome. So I want to mention something right now. I remember the Spencer Haywood deal, right? Do you know about the Spencer Haywood deal with Nike?
The answer is offered. I do not specifically. I certainly remember Spencer Haywood, Trinidad Junior College, before he matriculated, as it were, to the NBA.
Nike offered him 10% of their company, or $100,000, and his agent advised him to take the $100,000. Now, this was in '73. Now that I'm hearing what you're saying, it makes sense because he's getting paid immediately off that $100,000 than the 10% of stock, which he probably wouldn't get a percentage of. Is that correct?
Who knows what evil lurks? I don't know. I can't. I'm not sure.
Right. I'm not blaming it on, because ultimately it's Spencer's choice.
Yes.
Right. And he said that was the biggest mistake that he made. And come to find out, Magic Johnson turned down the same deal.
Yes, I've read that more recently, that he could have had that which you just described, but
and that 10% is now worth $3.5 billion
at least. Right.
Now, Peter Martin wants to know, did you do that same thing for Pearl when he had his contract, the deferred payment?
The answer is no. First of all, Dwayne did not have a great career in the NBA. He didn't earn a lot of money. He had a 3-year deal at $250,000, $275,000, and $300,000, if I'm not mistaken. And I wanted to do some things, but here's what I did do, and this is a great story. Pearl had a shoe contract with Avia, A-V-I-A. It was then
I remember that.
A young new company, and they came and they signed him. And part of the deal was a minutes played clause, which said that if player, Pearl, plays an average of 20 minutes per game in the regular season, in other words, a total of 20 times 82 games, player will get $20,000. It's the last game of the season. It was a home game. Pearl was playing for the New Jersey Nets at the time, and over in the Meadowlands. And I am, of course, I'm at the game, and I know very well about the clause in the contract. And it seems that Dwayne needs 23 minutes in that game to achieve his clause, to achieve his incentive clause, 20,000. The game's over, and I go downstairs to the scorer's table. The official scorer, who's the scorer for the Nets forever, passed away, I think, last year, a guy named Herb Turetsky, wonderful guy.
Peace.
I said, Herb, how many minutes did Dwayne have? And Herb says 20. And I told Herb the story that Dwayne needed 23. Herb reaches into his vest pocket and pulls out a pencil. He erases 20 on the scorecard, puts in 23, and takes a minute away from 3 other players. And Pearl got his $20,000.
Wow, wow. Salute to Herb and rest in peace.
I'll give you another one along those lines.
Wow, that's awesome. Go ahead. You can give it. So you got another one?
I represented Mark Jackson, and I negotiated Mark's shoe contract with Nike, and it was a 3-year deal. Mark, I think, was the 17th choice on the first round. Not that high, obviously, and also a lot of people questioned whether he would even make it because he wasn't that quick, he wasn't that strong, he wasn't that fast, and see, nobody knew how he could see the floor and really be the great point guard that he became.
Right.
Because he played in a very structured, slowed down college situation at St. John's. That was Louis Carnesecca's MO. I saw Mark. I ran a summer program in New York City for guys that either A, were draft choices, B, wanted to get into a camp, or C, wanted to go to Europe. And I saw Mark in a pro-type situation, open floor, a lot more NBA style, and I saw what he could do. So I knew that, I felt that he's going to be a lot better than a lot of people thought. In any case, I'm negotiating Mark's shoe contract with Howard Slusher, who had been a big-time agent and now was a big executive at Nike. And I said, Howard, I want $100,000 bonus if Mark is the rookie of the year. And I want the bonus to become part of his base salary for the next 2 years of his contract. Again, if he makes the bonus. And nobody thought Mark was going to be the rookie of the year. I didn't think Mark was going to be the rookie of the year, to be honest, but I wanted to put it in, which I did. And they agreed. And Mark became the rookie of the year. And what was I think his 3-year deal was $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. You're talking about a $60,000 deal, became a deal worth close to $400,000. Why? Because in addition to the 100 he got as a bonus, the next 2 years, that 100 also became part of his base salary. And that was one of the better things I've done over the years.
This is why you legendary, Don.
I'm not late. I left some money on the table too. I remember negotiating for Anthony Mason with the Knicks, and had a meeting literally in a hotel with Ernie Grunfeld, who was assistant GM to Dave Checketts. This was Mason's first contract that I was negotiating for Mason. I did not originally have Anthony as a client when he first got in. Well, he was drafted on the second round by Portland. He didn't even go to Portland. He went overseas the first year and played in Turkey. And in the second year, he played in South America. I was his third or fourth agent, and I tried to get him originally. I thought for sure he would be my client coming out of school because he went to Tennessee State University, and that was my place. But at the last minute, he took somebody else. I was really unhappy, but I was lucky because had I gotten him originally, I don't think I would have kept him. He would have gone to a second and maybe a third agent. But I, at the time, was representing Mark Jackson, and Anthony had been brought in by the Knicks. In other words, Anthony had been knocking around, and nobody really thought much of him. Nobody, meaning the scouts, etc. However, there was a summer league, and this particular summer, which I believe was the summer of '92, Anthony played on a team, the Long Island Surf, which was run by a guy named Ed Krinsky, a basketball lifer. Ed had gone to Harvard, was a point guard there, and was always involved in basketball and knew what he was doing and what he was looking at. And Ed was and I wasn't representing Anthony, and but I know the story. Ed was very close with the two head scouts for the Knicks, Dickie McGuire and Fuzzy Levain. And Ed said to these guys, you need to look at Mason. And on Ed's recommendation, the Knicks first had an early summer camp up in Westchester, and they brought Anthony in for that, and he did very well. And then they took him out to the LA Summer League. The Knicks had a team in the Summer League. That was the summer, '92, that the Knicks signed Pat Riley to be their coach. And the way it works, as you know, is the coaches in the Summer League, they sit in the stands and let the assistants run the team. And I'm out in LA and I see Anthony. I say hello to him. You know, we knew each other, but he's represented by someone else. And the story is that Anthony rebounded a ball, dribbled the length of the floor. You know, a guy that size had a great handle, and then he dunked on somebody. And Pat Riley sitting in the stands says, "Bring him to camp." And they brought him to veterans camp, and he wasn't supposed to make the team, but Anthony Mason was Pat Riley in the sense of he was the same kind of fierce competitor. He came from nowhere, and he made it. He willed himself, Anthony did, into the NBA. And then when Riley saw what a great defensive player he was and what a great athlete he was, he could guard 4 positions. He could guard anybody on the floor, and he did. And he especially made an impression when during the camp, you know, the Knicks were big and tough. This was Riley and Oakley and Xavier McDaniel, and Mason got into it with McDaniel. And, you know, nobody wanted to mess with X-Man, but Mason wasn't afraid of anybody. And he made the team. And Riley starts giving him minutes. In other words, with about a minute or so to go in the first quarter, Riley would give Oakley a blow, you know, extending his, you know, give him a minute or 2 extra in addition to the time between quarters. So Mason would go out and he'd lock up, as in defensively lock up whoever he was guarding. He was fierce, and that's what he wanted to do. We called him the locksmith. But in any case, by the end of the year, he's getting 25 minutes. They're a playoff team. And he sees me at every game because I'm representing Mark Jackson. And Mark Jackson's whole family was at every game because they were all New York people. Just like Anthony's family was at every game because they're New York people. And he saw how close I was with Mark and his family. And he came to me at the end of that year. He said, "Don, you know, I know I'm on the way up. I want you to represent me," which, of course, I did. You know, wonderful. And I got Mason, who became, you know, a big star in New York, especially in New York. People loved him. He played here. He played in Miami. He played in Charlotte after here, and then he played in Miami. He played in, I believe, Milwaukee. But you know, one of those memorable characters and players. You know, the Garden back in the day was rocking. I mean, especially when the Bulls came to town. Knicks never got past the Bulls, as we all know, but
of course, no one did. No one did. Listen, I credit Anthony Mason. Anthony Mason, Mike Morrison, and Lloyd Daniels are the only guys who got the best of me. in my whole basketball
Sweet
career.
Pea, right, Lloyd?
Sweet Peas, my God, that's
I
right.
remember.
Yep. And
I'll tell you what happened
I
to
played
me in
against
high
Anthony
school.
Mason when he was with the Knicks, and he was such a tough guard. And myself, he had 34, I had 28, and that's where he was playing with Prime Time in the West Fourth Basketball League. Yep.
Well, these. I'll give you a story from high school. My senior year in high school, Teaneck, New Jersey, was 1960, but I was closely following New York City high school basketball. I just was interested, and the two big names at the time were Connie Hawkins from Boys High School.
That's right.
And Roger Brown from Wingate.
That's right.
They had never played in public against each other. They probably played in the schoolyards, but never in public. And now it's early March, I think March 6th of 1960, and it's the semifinals, the Final Four of the PSAL, Public School Athletic League basketball tournament. And there was a doubleheader in the Garden during the week, and then on an afternoon during the week. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm not going to school today. She said, why not? I said, I'm going to the Garden to see a high school basketball game. And she looked at me, but I was doing okay in school, so she didn't really mind. This was Connie Hall. It was Columbus High School against Van Buren in the first game and Boys Wingate in the second game.
Yep.
And Roger Brown went off. 39, one of the great performances. People, if you want to say what's the most significant high school game in New York City basketball history, this game is certainly in the discussion. Let's put it that way.
No, this is the discussion. I remember reading about that, and everyone, was talking about Connie Hawkins and Roger Brown absolutely destroyed him. I wouldn't say destroyed him, but at that game, everybody knew that Roger Brown was just on the same level as Connie Hawkins.
Magnificent. And Hawk fouled out, and Boys barely won because one of Wingate's players, I forget his name, missed an open layup. And then they went on to the finals against Columbus High School, and the coach at Columbus, later coach of the Sixers, Roy Rubin, sat on the ball, but Boys won anyway, 21-16. I didn't see the game, but I remember all of that, so to speak. I mean, I was into the whole sports thing, long before I actually got in the business, let's say.
Got you. What would you say is the biggest shift in representing clients today compared to yesteryear?
As I said, I've been out of the business for 20 years now, thereabouts, but I keep in touch, and I think what I'm about to say is accurate. Back in the day, you could run a boutique, e.g. small business, which was my business. It was me. I had an assistant in the office, basically secretarial, etc. And I had a couple of guys that worked with me. I was the one out there recruiting. They were helping me, but I was the one going to all the campuses. And you couldn't do that today in that structure. You have to have capital behind you. Right. You have to have a structure. You have to be able to show the players your connections to the entertainment world and these entertainers that you're also representing. And there's this whole crossover now that you really didn't have back then. You really need, as I say, it costs a lot more money today to do what I was doing back then. I think that's the biggest change.
Wow. So tell me something about that Howard Wood case.
Howard Wood went to, that's a funny story. Howard Wood is from East Hampton, New York. I first met Howard. I used to go to the Hamptons on summer weekends. In fact, I spent 95% at least of every summer weekend from 1969 to 2012 in the Hamptons, summer meaning Memorial Day to Labor Day. Why? I'd rent houses, I owned a place, whatever. Early on in the 70s, I was out there and there was this place that everybody went to on Friday nights, a place called Martell's. It was a bar or restaurant, music, DJ, just social. Everybody go there. My buddy and I, we decided we didn't want to pay the $5 to get in. So we went out around the side and started climbing over a fence when the security guy, who happened to be Howard Wood from East Hampton High School at the time, caught us. So, we paid our money. And later on, Howard went to the University of Tennessee and became an All-American. And I believe it was a second-round choice. Now, the Utah Jazz, who had chosen him, drafted him,
yep,
offered him a contract, 5 years, no guarantee, no bonus. And we would have maybe taken a 1 year minimum. No, you have to sign 5 years. I said, well, what happens if Howard becomes a really good player? No, well, this was wrong. So I sued the NBA. I was an attorney, admitted to the bar. I was not a courtroom attorney. That was not my milieu. That was not my arena. But I went and I sued the NBA. I had a friend of mine who was a courtroom attorney backstopping me. And the NBA poo-pooed it. But I'll tell you what, when we sat down, and the person that oversaw the whole NBA legal situation, my goodness, I'm forgetting his name, who was an African-American judge. And we met with the judge, so to speak, pre-trial. And I did some research and I found out that the day we were meeting, myself, the judge, and the three NBA attorneys, was the judge's birthday. So now we're in the room and I said, Your Honor, before we start talking about the situation, let me wish you a happy birthday. And this judge, who had a very strong, almost chiseled looking face, he had very strong features, and of course was wearing his black robe. His whole face melted into a big smile. That's what I remember more than anything. And we settled in that they gave him, some bonus, but it was like a 2-year deal, something a lot more consistent with reality. So that was my NBA legal diversion, or call it what you will, my attempt to overthrow the establishment. Not really, but at least we got something fair.
That's right. You put up a good fight. Why did you say the draft was illegal? Was that the reason why?
No, I didn't say the draft was. I said what they were doing, meaning offering him a take it or leave it contract of 5 years.
Gotcha.
Without, they wouldn't even offer him a minimum 1 year deal. You're certainly entitled to that. And that was part of the ruling, that they couldn't, because what would you do? I mean, you just offer all these guys no bonus. Now, if you're drafted higher, obviously you have more leverage.
Right.
But even so, there's got to be some relative fairness. At least that was my and Howard's feeling. And it turned out we were right, because we were able to get something done in that regard. It was not the case never went to trial. It was settled at some point.
Got you. Now, with the new NBA television deal that's coming up, right? Because I think this is the reason why they created the in-season tournament, to bring more viewership and more excitement.
It's all about the money. You're right about that, Greg.
That's all about the money. People think that they created this in-season tournament to benefit the NBA, the fans, but really it's to bring more viewership, because they're looking to get a new NBA deal, which is going to be upwards of $8 billion. Now,
it's unbelievable where it's gone.
With the new TV deal, do you think the NBA will still be able to sustain paying the athletes these enormous salaries because Jaylen Brown got a $300+ million deal this past offseason?
They're paying it because they have it. And it's fairly clear and probably abundantly clear that they are going to get a new deal, and it's going to be worth a lot more media rights wise than previously.
Right.
And therefore, they will be able to continue to pay the players. But see, the thing that bothers me, I didn't represent superstars. I represented some guys who were stars and whatever, but my guys were not the first guy in the draft. I had, let's say, the third, fourth, or fifth guy on a given team. And whatever the numbers, there's always a pie, a financial pie, if you want to call it that, meaning how much a team is able to pay all of its players. It was very, very small back in the day. It's gotten much bigger now, but it's still finite. Plus, you have salary caps, etc. And the problem is that if you give a particular player X and there's only so much left for all the other players, and it tends to be that the big guys, the main guys, the supers are going to get these numbers. And you see it in baseball, you see it all over. Everybody wrestles with their salary structure because of how much they're committed to whomever they're already committed to. There's only so much left for the others. I would like to see something done about the other players, the top, the 3, 4, 5 guy and the first couple of substitutes, them being able to get paid more than they're able to get now. But that's a tough problem.
That's the name of the game. And the bench guys are getting paid way more than these guys was getting paid back in the day. So,
sure.
you definitely want to level the playing field. What are your feelings on the NIL deals?
When I say mixed, players should be able to benefit from their services. I mean, I'm not against players being paid, but the problem you have, and I was just reading an article today, New York Times, about one of the coaches, I think it was Mac Brown, who's a football coach at North Carolina, former USC coach. And there's no regulation. There's got to be somebody, as in not person, but some group, that oversees and regulates this. Otherwise, it's going to get out of control completely. And you're paying kids hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions. I was reading the other day, there's a gymnast at LSU, female gymnast. She's got several $1 million in NIL benefits, which is great. But, unless you start regulating it to some degree, the bigger schools are going to continue to control everything because they have the most money.
Yeah.
It's all about the money, as it usually is. And there's got to be more regulation of it. It's not going away. I mean, it's here to stay. I think the guy that really is more responsible than anyone for what's going on in the college scene regarding NIL, etc., is my old friend Sonny Vaccaro.
Yes.
Sonny originally was, he's always went after the NCAA. And I think it was Ed O'Bannon who played at UCLA. and I believe a lawsuit was brought on his behalf regarding a lot of these financial issues, and I think that's where the dam started to break as far as the NCAA controlling everything, etc. I think you're going to see a lot more change. Changes coming in the future regarding this, because it's new, and it needs regulation for sure.
Well, listen, right now, Ron Harper's son, Dylan Harper, he just signed with Rutgers.
Rutgers.
He's still in high school. He's still in high school. His NIL deal is $604,000. Okay. Then you got McCade Mator, excuse me, 63,000. Darren Peterson, 270,000. Right? And we're not even getting to the girl who's at LSU who's getting over $1 million. Okay, so it's getting crazy out here. Let me get this up.
Makes you think you were born too soon, right?
man, it's getting crazy out here, Don. Well, listen, that's right, and I believe it. I believe it too, Eric. I believe it too. Let these kids get all the money they can get, because we've been playing for free for a long time, and they weren't giving us anything. We went hungry.
Right.
They gave us that 3 meals a day and expect that to hold us off when we burning it off in 2 a days. Right. So you got 2 a days, you burning off the food that you have, and they couldn't give us an extra meal after that. So right now, hold off on the regulation. Hold off, because you're not regulating what the pros are getting paid.
I'm not saying they shouldn't get paid, and I'm not trying to take money away.
I know you're saying that.
Structure out there.
Right, but it's I just think for right now, let's get paid. Let's get paid. Let's get paid. Because I wish I was in that position, and if these kids could benefit. Now, look, let's think about it, right? So if hold on, let me get the names right, because I want to LSU's women's star. Right? So if you have Angel Reese, right, and Caitlin Clark, if they left and went to the WNBA last year, they would have get paid peanuts.
Right.
So they refused. Now, they could have did something huge. If the WNBA was smart, I would have just upped the ante just so I could get those 2 stars and make it a Larry Bird, Magic Johnson situation in the WNBA. The WNBA takes off. There's more revenue to be split with these women basketball players, but they can't and they won't. So these girls didn't go to the WNBA, and they stayed in college because they both were getting paid over $1 million a year.
Yes.
So, let them get paid. Let them get paid. Let them get paid.
I'm in favor of that. I'm not saying there shouldn't. I just think there should be some more structure in that. There's some. See, the way the rules are, you're not supposed to. The schools, alumni are not supposed to do this or that. It's really up in the air as far as what you can and can't do. It seems to me at this point, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on from what I've read.
But it's been that way. I got guys who come on my show,
it's been that way.
They say in an indirect way, yo, Glenn, we was getting paid, Glenn. We was getting paid. We was getting those secret handshakes.
See, now it's out in the open, and that's good, but you need to regulate all these situations. Not cut them out, regulate them. There's a difference.
Got you. So, my man Eric McRae said some things. He said, I'm in the process of becoming an NIL agent. There's enough for everyone, for the star to the bench warmers in college. The WNBA stars go overseas and get paid, which is a shame. It is a damn shame. My God told me, I appreciate you, Eric. My guys told me He's a college coach. I'm not going to say his name. He told me he got guys on his bench that's getting paid $80,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not bad. I was a starter, so just imagine. We'll be raking in the dough, Don. We'll be raking in the dough. Hey, listen,
why
Don.
not? Right? Why not?
If you could change one thing about your journey as an agent, what would it be and why?
That's a good question. There's probably players that I didn't get. I mean, I don't have a lot of regrets. I've lived a blessed life in that I had two of the most wonderful parents and a wonderful stepfather. And my dad died on the golf course of a heart attack suddenly at age 67.
Sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that.
And I had just moved out of the house. It was 1972. And in the early part of the year, this is before my dad died, I moved from Teaneck, New Jersey, my home, to an apartment that I sublet in New York City because I wanted to have a New York business address rather than a Teaneck, New Jersey business address. That was in more or less April of 72. On August 5th of that year, my dad had a heart attack and died. I immediately moved back to Teaneck, New Jersey, to be with my mom, who was alone, my sister having moved out to get married. And for the next 5 years, my mom and I lived together, and she was my secretary and bookkeeper as I started my sports business.
Wow, salute to Mom.
And,
that's awesome.
Then 5 years later, she got married, and then I literally wound up buying the co-op that my stepfather lived in New York City. And they moved to Florida. I moved into New York City from 1977 to 2007.
Hold on, Don. Hold on. Y'all hear that? Don bought the condo 1970. What, Don? What?
It was 1977.
Woo! All right, Don. Good job.
Well, so, it didn't cost a whole lot of money back then, and but I'll tell you what, the value certainly went up in the next 30 years.
Hey, that's right. That's like that St. Louis Spirits deal, right?
Yeah. It wasn't quite a $1 billion deal, but it was a good one for me.
But I consider that to be the number one deal ever made with the NBA.
Well, it was based on the numbers. I mean, it's unbelievable. And it's my fraternity brother, Donnie Shupak, who crafted the whole thing.
That's right. Salute
I remember that this goes back now about 10 years. Donnie finally agreed to be honored. And there was a function at the Friars Club in New York City. And Donnie was honored, not for any of that which we just discussed, but because he had set up the High School for Leadership and Public Service in New York City. That offered underprivileged kids scholarships to the high school. And if they did well, they got scholarships to Syracuse University. And it was a roaring success. Really 20 years. And then finally Donnie said, okay, you can honor me at the Friars Club. And Bob Costas flew in to MC the ceremony because, as I told you earlier, he owed his career to Donnie Shupak. And I'll tell you a funny story. There were 6 speakers that night. There was, of course, Costas, who was the MC. There were 2 kids from the school who spoke, and there were 2 administrators from the school who spoke. And I spoke. Why? I knew Donnie longer than anybody in the room.
Right.
And I got up and I said, Donnie was this wild and crazy guy, smart as a whip, out there, but fun and funny. remember I said Donnie lived in the fraternity house on the second floor at Syracuse. And really, he had a puppy, and he didn't want to walk the puppy in the cold because Syracuse back then got real cold.
Yes.
And so what Donnie would do is he'd take a clothesline and he'd tie it around the dog's waist, and he'd let the dog out the window holding the clothesline down into the yard, and the dog would run around and piddle and poo. And then Donnie would pull the dog back up. and the crowd is laughing. And I said, okay, now, everybody raise your glass. In 2 months, Donald Chupak will be 70 years old. Let us salute the 70th upcoming 70th anniversary of Donald Chupak's circumcision. And I walked off the stage.
Wow.
And Bob Costas followed me up and said, Don Cronson is a tough act to follow. So that'll go on my headstone, probably, something like that. Anyway.
Oh, man. So, listen, Eric McRae, he's going to be an NIL agent, right? Do you have any advice for him?
Hustle. You know, when I say hustle, you got to get out there and, as the expression goes, press the flesh. I don't think recruiting now is any different in certain respects than it ever was. You have to establish this rapport with your would-be and keep it with your real clients. And that's meaning be there and impress upon them, obviously going in recruiting, that you're going to be there for them. I got very few players off the top, meaning right away. I got a lot of my guys on the rebound from other agents because for whatever reason they weren't pleased with whatever the services they were supposed to get. And once I got a guy, I kept him because I was all over my guys. They knew that if something happened, I'd be on a plane the next morning. And you've got to convince, as a recruiter, before you get your guy or woman, in this case, a lot of great female sports now too, you got to convince them that you're going to be there. And you're going to be there, long after this, the excitement or the recruiting is done. And that's what I think, should aim for. And also you need to develop good relationships with the recruit's family, the mother, the father, whomever, the important people in his or her life. You really need to be able to relate to and convince them that you can relate to them. It's personal in a lot of ways. You got to have the capital behind you and all the other push, but it also comes down to a very personal thing.
I appreciate that, Don. You ready for me to show him? Here, bring it. So, Don, in recognition of all your years of service and coming on the show, we would like to show you your portrait.
Oh, let me put my glasses on for this preview of this showing. Here they are. My goodness gracious. How nice. How nice. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I mean, I've enjoyed this very much. A walk down my memory lane, so to speak, and
yes,
which I love to do. By the way, we talked all sports. There's some other things going on at Syracuse relative to music, popular music and industry. If you're interested, I can tell you some great stories about that.
Well, we're about to sign off right now, but I would love to bring you back. I would love to bring you back.
Give me a call when you get a moment. I'll tell you what I'm talking about music-wise, and we can go from there.
We could talk. 'Cause I spent 15 years in the music industry myself, so trust me, we can definitely talk about that. Salute to my guy Jamel Powell for hooking us up for you. I'll be in contact with you to get your address, and I'll mail this out to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Greg. It's very, very nice. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed being on.
Yeah, that's Glenn. Just to
I
go.
hope
Glenn.
I hope you like me
Harding.
being on. That's all I can ask.
Nah, I got you. I appreciate you, Don. Thank you, Carol, for hooking us up. Appreciate you, family. And Don, say hi to your wife for me.
It's my girlfriend of 27 years, but she's just like my wife, Antonia Gilligan by name.
You heard that? Don, 80 years old, still got a girlfriend. Salute, Don. You the man, brother. All right. I'm about to get out of here.
Thank you. Again. Be well.
You. All right.
Bye-bye now.
Yes. Wow. We talked about legendary, right? Don Cronson. He don't think he's legendary. Y'all heard all those stories. You only going to get it from somebody who's been around. He's been with some of the best that we consider the best in New York City. Dwayne Pearl Washington, Mark Jackson, and Anthony Mason, all legends in the city. So salute to you, Don. Keep doing what you do, man. Enjoy your retirement, man. Enjoy your retirement. And we'll do part 2 soon. Definitely. I'd like to thank everybody that was on the check-in tonight. We appreciate you. Peter Martin, thank you. Ayatollah Beats. Salute, Maurice. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. Najin, live on TV. Thank you. Professor Mike Milligan, appreciate you. AB Money, appreciate you, King. Eric McCrae, thank you, man. And good luck in all your endeavors. And I wish you all success. Eric Kennedy, all black. Listen, you never know what life is going to bring you. You just have to live it. You have to be thankful for all your experiences. You have to enjoy the process because you may miss out on something great. And also, be good with people because you never know when it might be your turn for them to do something good for you. And when other agents passed on clients, Don Cronson was there to make sure he was the best agent for them to land with. So remember, be a good person, live your life, and enjoy the experiences. You never know what life may bring you. Well, I'm about to be out of here. I am your host, Glenn Pooh Harding, and you've been watching Basketball Heads Live, the podcast on NYC Basketball History, because we are the official home for New York City basketball. Like we always do around this time, peace.